Wheelchair-bound old father kicked out of home for being considered useless. But days later, George Wilson never imagined that after 72 years of life, he would be thrown out on the street by his own son. The pain in his chest was greater than the pain in his legs that he could no longer move since his fall. Michael pointed angrily toward the front door, his eyes blazing as he shouted words that cut deeper than any physical wound. His daughter-in-law Jennifer held her husband's arm, trying to appear as if she agreed, but her eyes showed an anguish she couldn't completely hide. "Dad, you've become a burden to this family," Michael yelled, the veins in his neck bulging. "You can't work anymore, you can't help with anything, you're just an expense." George felt each word like a stab. 6 months ago, he could still tend the small garden in the backyard by himself. 6 months ago, he was still the strong man who built those walls with his own hands. Now confined to a wheelchair after slipping in the bathroom during a heavy rain, he depended on others, even to bathe. "Michael, maybe we could talk about this." Jennifer tried to interrupt, but was cut off by her husband. "There's nothing to talk about, Jennifer. We can barely pay the bills and we still have to support him, no more." The old man looked at the simple 3-room house he had built brick by brick when Michael was just a baby. The walls still bore the marks of his labor, the renovations he'd made over the years, the yard he'd planted with such care. Now he was being thrown out like a stranger. Jennifer threw some clothes into an old grocery bag, avoiding looking directly at her father-in-law. George noticed she was trembling and wondered if it was from nerves or shame. Perhaps both. "Where will I go?" George asked, his voice choked. "That's not my problem," Michael replied, pushing the wheelchair toward the door. "You always thought you were so clever. Now figure it out." The afternoon was grey when George found himself alone on the dirt road he'd known for decades. Neighbors peeked through windows, whispering among themselves, but no one had the courage to get involved. The small town in rural Pennsylvania didn't usually see scenes like that. He pushed the wheels of his chair slowly, with no particular destination. Each turn of the wheels took him further from the house that was once his home. His heart beat irregularly, mixing sadness with a feeling of abandonment he hadn't even felt when he became an orphan at 15. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The first hours were the most difficult. George stopped under a tree in the central square, trying to think of what to do. He had no close relatives, and the few friends he had left were elderly like him. Pride kept him from knocking on acquaintances' doors, asking for help. When night fell, the cold began to cut through his thin clothes. He had never slept on the street before, and discovered it was much worse than he'd imagined. Every noise startled him, every gust of wind made him shiver more. It was the next morning that Margaret Johnson found the old man. She arrived early to open the flower shop that faced the square, as she had done for 15 years, when she saw that hunched figure in the wheelchair. "My goodness!" she exclaimed, dropping her keys on the ground. "Did you spend the night out here?" George raised his face, embarrassed. Margaret was a woman of about 50, her already greying hair tied in a simple bun, wearing modest but always clean clothes. He knew her by sight, but they had never properly spoken. "Sorry to bother you, Mrs. George began, but she interrupted him. "Margaret, and you're not bothering at all. Are you feeling unwell? Do you need a doctor?" The genuine concern in her voice touched the old man's heart. It had been a long time since someone had spoken to him that way, with real care. "No, I don't need a doctor. It's just—" He hesitated, shame heavy in his throat. "My son kicked me out of the house yesterday." Margaret opened her mouth, shocked. She knew Michael by sight, too, aware he was the son of old Mr. Wilson, who lived on the street behind the flower shop. She never imagined something like this could happen. "What do you mean he kicked you out?" she asked, genuinely confused. "He said I've become a burden, that I'm no good for anything anymore," George explained, his voice growing softer. "After I ended up in this chair, I really can't help much." Margaret felt anger rising in her chest. She herself had lost her parents young and always dreamed of caring for them in their old age. Seeing someone abandon their own father like that left her deeply upset. "Come with me," she said, picking up the keys from the ground. "I'll make some coffee and we can talk properly." I don't want to be a bother. You're not bothering me, she insisted, already pushing his wheelchair toward the flower shop. No one deserves to spend the night on the street, especially not a man your age. Margaret's flower shop was small but cozy. The colourful flowers contrasted with the grey morning, and the sweet scent of roses mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee created a welcoming atmosphere that George hadn't felt in months. She took him to the back of the store, where there was a small room that served as an office and kitchen. There was a simple table, 2 chairs, and an old sofa where Margaret sometimes rested during breaks. "Have a seat. I'll heat up the coffee," she said, pointing to a spot near the table. While stirring the stove, Margaret discreetly observed the old man. Even in the wheelchair, he had a dignified posture, broad shoulders that showed he was once a strong man. His blue eyes were sad, but still shone with intelligence. "What did you used to do for work?" she asked, trying to start a conversation. "I was a teacher," George replied, his voice gaining a bit more life. "Math. I taught at the state school for 35 years. Margaret stopped stirring the coffee and turned to look at him. "A math teacher? Really?" "Yes, really. Why the surprise?" "It's just that I've always struggled with numbers," she confessed, laughing softly. "Even now I rack my brains to do the flower shop's bookkeeping." George smiled for the first time in a long while. It felt good to know there was still something he could do well, even confined to a wheelchair. "If you want, I could take a look at your calculations," he offered shyly. "I don't have much else to do anyway." "Really? That would be a huge help," Margaret exclaimed, pouring the coffee. "These papers have been giving me a headache for weeks." They spent the whole morning together. George went through Margaret's accounting books and quickly spotted several mistakes she had been making. With patience and clarity, he explained how to do the calculations correctly. "Wow, you have a real gift for explaining," she said, impressed. "In half an hour I understood more than in years of trying on my own." The old man felt useful again. For a few hours, he forgot the sadness and humiliation of the previous night. It was as if an important part of himself was coming back to life. "Thank you for helping me, Mrs. Margaret," he said, when she suggested they have lunch. "It's been a long time since I felt needed." "Needed? Of course you're needed," she replied sincerely. "And you can just call me Margaret. No need for Mrs." During the simple lunch they prepared together, George told her more about his life. He talked about his teaching years, about how he raised Michael alone after his wife passed away when the boy was just 8 years old. He told of the sacrifices he made to provide education and opportunities for his son. Margaret listened attentively, shaking her head in disbelief when he reached the part about being kicked out. "I can't believe a son could do that to his own father," she murmured, "especially after everything you've done for him." "I think he's stressed about the bills, about Jennifer's pregnancy," George tried to justify, still feeling the sting of his son's words. "There's no excuse for that," Margaret countered firmly. "Financial problems don't give you the right to abandon family." The afternoon passed quickly. George helped Margaret with some more calculations and organized all her paperwork. In return, she insisted he stay for dinner and spend the night on the office sofa. "I can't accept," he protested. "I've already taken too much advantage of your kindness." "Kindness nothing," she replied. "You've helped me more today than any accountant I've ever hired. It's a fair exchange." That night, for the first time in 6 months, George fell asleep, feeling valued. The following days brought an unexpected routine. George arrived early at the flower shop and helped Margaret with all the administrative work. She had discovered that he wasn't just good with numbers, but also had excellent ideas for improving the business. "Why don't we make themed arrangements?" he suggested on the 3rd day. "Flowers for weddings, for birthdays, for mourning, each with a specific price." "I never thought of that," Margaret answered, excited. "You're right, it would be much more organized." Meanwhile, in the house that was once his, Michael began to feel the weight of the decision he had made. Jennifer was quieter than normal, and he noticed she had been looking at him differently since they kicked out his father. "Are you okay?" he asked one night during dinner. "I am," she replied without looking up from her plate. "Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" Jennifer hesitated before answering. Since discovering her pregnancy 3 weeks ago, she had been reflecting a lot about family and responsibility. "About your father," she said finally. "I wonder if we did the right thing." Michael felt his stomach tighten. In recent days, whenever he passed through the central square, he had discreetly looked for his father, but never found him. Part of him felt relieved, another part worried. "Jennifer, we talked about this. We had no choice." He tried to convince himself as much as her. "Didn't we?" she asked, finally looking at him. "Your father worked his whole life, raised you alone, built this house, and we just threw him out because he got sick?" "He didn't just get sick, Jennifer. He can't do anything anymore." Michael defended himself, but his voice came out less firm than he would have liked. "And when we get old," she asked softly, "when we can't do anything anymore, will our son throw us out too?" The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Michael didn't know how to respond, and they finished dinner in silence. At the flower shop, George had become part of the routine. Margaret discovered that he not only helped her with the numbers, but also had a special way with customers. His patience and politeness won over people who came to buy flowers. "Mr. George," Mrs. Betty, a regular customer, exclaimed upon seeing him. "You disappeared from the school. How are you?" "I'm well, Mrs. Betty," he answered with a genuine smile. "Retired, but still useful." "Of course you're useful," she said, buying an arrangement he had suggested. "Teachers never stop teaching." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, it was true. Even without a classroom, George continued teaching. Whenever a child passed by the flower shop struggling with homework, Margaret always called him over to help. Soon, several parents began bringing their children to receive math explanations. "I can't charge for this," he said when Margaret suggested he charge for the lessons. "Teaching has always been my passion. I don't need to make money from it." "Then at least accept sharing the flower shop's profits," she insisted. "Since you arrived here, sales have increased 30%. Margaret wasn't exaggerating. The organization that George brought to the business, combined with his creative ideas, was truly making a difference. They created seasonal promotions, improved customer service, and even started making deliveries in the neighborhood. But there was something that Margaret noticed that intrigued her. Whenever the phone rang, George became tense. When she answered and asked who it was, he always signaled to say he wasn't there. "Is someone looking for you?" she asked one day, after he refused another call. "It's Michael," he admitted. "I don't want to talk to him now." "He's been calling for days. Maybe he wants to apologize," Margaret suggested, though inside she felt anger toward the young man. "It's not an apology he wants," George replied bitterly. "If it were, he would have come here already. It must be something else." He was right. Michael wasn't calling to apologize. In fact, he was calling because he had discovered something that completely changed the situation. It all started when Jennifer found a letter that had arrived in the mail addressed to George Wilson. Without thinking twice, she opened it to see what it was about. It was correspondence from the bank, notifying about the maturity of a financial investment. "Michael!" she shouted, holding the paper with trembling hands. "Come see this." When Michael read the letter, his eyes widened. The value of the investment was much larger than anything he could have imagined. His father had saved money for decades and had never mentioned anything. "How long has he kept this from us?" Michael asked, feeling betrayed. "Maybe he was saving it for some emergency," Jennifer suggested, but inside she also felt confused. "Emergency?" Michael almost shouted. "We were going through financial hardship, and he kept this. He could have helped with the household bills." Jennifer looked at her husband and didn't like what she saw. The gleam in his eyes wasn't one of relief or happiness, but of greed, as if he had finally found the solution to all their problems at his father's expense. "What are you thinking?" she asked apprehensively. "I'm thinking I need to talk to my father," Michael replied, already planning in his head how to approach the issue. "To apologize?" Michael hesitated. In truth, he didn't know if he wanted to apologize. He was more interested in understanding why his father had never mentioned that money, and mainly in convincing him to use part of it to help the family. "To talk," was all he answered. In the following days, Michael tried several times to find his father, but had no idea where he was. He called the flower shop because he knew Margaret was known for helping people in need, but they always said George wasn't there. "Why doesn't he want to talk to me?" Michael asked Jennifer after another unsuccessful call. "Maybe because you kicked him out of the house by calling him useless," she replied, with a harshness he wasn't used to hearing. The pregnancy was making Jennifer more sensitive, but also more honest about her feelings. Seeing her husband obsessed with finding his father-in-law right after discovering the money deeply bothered her. "Do you want to talk to him because of the inheritance or because you miss him?" she asked directly. "Of course I miss him." Michael defended himself, but it sounded unconvincing. "And it's not inheritance, it's family help. He could have used that money to contribute to the household expenses." "Michael, listen to what you're saying," Jennifer said, placing her hand on her still small belly. "You kicked your father out of the house and now you want his money? It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Michael didn't know how to respond. Deep down, he knew Jennifer was right, but his pride and the discovery of the money were confusing his feelings. Meanwhile, at the flower shop, George Wilson's life had gained new meaning. Besides helping Margaret with the business, he had started a project that deeply moved him. It all began when Ryan, a 10-year-old boy, showed up crying because he couldn't understand his math lesson and was going to fail. "Come here, son," George said, calling the boy closer. "Let's look at this lesson together." Within half an hour, Ryan not only understood the material, but left the flower shop smiling. The next day he returned with 2 friends who also needed help. "Mr. George, could you teach us?" one of them asked. "My mom said she can pay." "No need to pay anything," George replied, his heart warming. "Bring your classmates too. Let's make a study group here in the back of the flower shop." Margaret watched that scene with a smile on her face. She saw how George transformed when he was teaching. His eyes sparkled, his voice gained energy, and he seemed to completely forget about the wheelchair. "Are you sure you don't want to charge?" she asked after the children left. "This could become a good income." "Margaret, I have savings," George confessed. "Not much, but enough to support myself. What I really want is to feel useful again." He didn't go into details about how much he had saved, but Margaret noticed he always carried a small key in his shirt pocket. Sometimes she saw him fiddling with it when he thought no one was looking. A teacher's savings probably aren't very big, she thought to herself, not realizing she was completely mistaken. In fact, George had been extremely careful with money his whole life. Besides his teacher's salary, he did extra accounting work and never spent beyond what was necessary. For 45 years, he saved every penny he could. The key he carried in his pocket was for a safe deposit box at the bank, where he kept not only his savings, but also some important documents and some jewelry that had belonged to his wife. Michael tried to go directly to the flower shop, but whenever he showed up, Margaret said George had stepped out. Actually, she was lying to protect the old man, who always hid in the back of the store when he saw his son approaching. "Why doesn't he want to talk to me?" Michael asked Margaret after several failed attempts. "Maybe because you hurt him deeply," she replied coldly. "It's not easy to forget when your own son calls you useless." "I was upset. I said things I didn't mean." "Then why didn't you apologize right on the first day?" Margaret countered. "Why did you only show up here a week later?" Michael couldn't answer. The truth was he had only started looking for his father after discovering the money, and Margaret seemed to realize this. "Listen, young man," she said firmly. "Your father is fine, he's being useful and he's happy. If you really care about him, leave him alone for now." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The weeks passed and the situation became even more complicated. Jennifer was 3 months pregnant and started having terrible morning sickness. Michael had to miss work several times to take care of her, which wasn't well received by his boss. "Michael, I've spoken with you about excessive absences," the supervisor said during a meeting. "I understand your wife is pregnant, but work can't be compromised." "She's feeling very sick. I need to take care of her," Michael defended himself. "And where is your family? Isn't there anyone who can help?" The question hit Michael like a punch in the stomach. He did have family, but he had kicked out the only relative who could help. That night, Jennifer was vomiting a lot and feeling weak. Michael took her to the hospital, where they discovered she was dehydrated and would need to be hospitalized for a few days. "Your wife needs rest and care," the doctor explained. "The pregnancy is normal, but stress could complicate things." While Jennifer slept in the hospital, Michael found himself alone, thinking about everything that had happened. For a moment, he imagined how good it would be if his father were there to offer support, to help with Jennifer, to share the worries. But then he remembered the money and the anger returned. Why had his father never offered financial help? Why had he kept the savings a secret? Meanwhile, at the flower shop, George had created something special. The study group had grown and now had 15 children, who came 3 times a week for math tutoring. "Mr. George, you're the best teacher in the world," said Mary Claire, an 8-year-old girl who had greatly improved her grades. "Thank you, my dear," he replied, his heart overflowing with joy. "But you did the work. I only helped." Margaret watched from afar and saw how those children loved George. They called him Grandpa George and always brought him little drawings or notes. "I've never seen anything like it," she commented to a friend. "These children treat him better than his own son." "Is it true that his son kicked him out of the house?" the friend asked, shocked. "Unfortunately, yes," Margaret confirmed. "What kind of person does that to their own father?" The news of what had happened was spreading through the small town. People were outraged when they found out that Michael had kicked his father out of the house because of the wheelchair. "I always thought Michael was a good guy," Mrs. Carroll, a neighbor for decades, commented at the bakery. "But after what he did to his father, I can't look at him the same way." "Me neither," agreed Mr. Joseph, the grocery store owner. "George has always been an upright, hard-working man. He didn't deserve this." Michael's social isolation was beginning. Neighbors who always greeted him now looked away. Some businesses served him coldly. The small town didn't easily forgive that kind of behavior. The situation worsened when Michael lost a promotion at work that was practically guaranteed. "Unfortunately, we've decided to promote another employee," the boss explained, without looking directly at him. "But why? My numbers are the best in the department," Michael argued. "It's a company decision," was the curt response he received. Later, Michael found out from a colleague that the boss had commented that he didn't trust people who abandoned their own family. The consequences of his decision were appearing in ways he had never imagined. Jennifer left the hospital still weak and needing rest. Michael had to take out a loan to pay the medical bills, and the financial situation became even tighter. "We need your father," Jennifer said one night, lying in bed, "not just for the money, but for the support. I felt safe with him at home." "Jennifer, you don't understand," Michael began, but she interrupted him. "Yes, I do. I understand that you kicked out a 72-year-old man out of pride, and now you're sorry but don't want to admit it. It's not pride." "Then what is it?" she asked, sitting up in bed with difficulty. "Explain to me why you don't go to the flower shop and apologize to your father." "Because he let me down!" Michael exploded. "He saved money while we were struggling. How can you not understand that?" Jennifer looked at her husband with an expression he had never seen before. It was a mix of disappointment, sadness, and something that looked a lot like contempt. "Michael, listen carefully to what you just said," she said slowly. "You kicked your father out when he needed care. Now you're angry because he has his own money. Don't you find that contradictory?" "It's different." "It's not different," she shouted, losing her patience. "You want to get rid of him when he needs you, but you want his money when you need it." The argument ended with Jennifer crying and Michael storming out of the house, slamming the door. For the first time since they got married, she seriously wondered what kind of man she had chosen to be the father of her child. At the flower shop, George had no idea about the problems his absence was causing in his son's life. He was focused on rebuilding his own life and finding a new purpose. The educational project had grown so much that Margaret suggested formalizing the activities. "We could turn this into a tutoring center," she proposed. "There's space in the back, and the kids already love coming here." "Do you think it would work?" George asked, excited about the idea. "I'm sure. You have a gift for teaching, and these kids are improving a lot in school." It was true. The public school teachers had noticed the significant improvement in the grades of the students who attended classes with George. Some parents started approaching Margaret directly to enroll their children. "Mrs. Margaret, do you think Professor George can help my daughter?" asked Valerie, the mother of a struggling student. "The teacher said she's improved a lot since she started studying with him." "Of course," Margaret replied. "Bring her next Tuesday." The community's recognition was making George feel valued in a way he hadn't experienced in years. One day, the principal of the public school showed up personally at the flower shop. "Professor George," he exclaimed upon seeing his old colleague. "So good to see you." "Principal Paul, how are you?" George answered, genuinely happy to see his former boss. "I'm fine, but concerned. I heard what happened to you and came to offer help." George was embarrassed. He didn't like people knowing about his family situation. "Thank you, Principal, but I'm doing fine here with Margaret," he said diplomatically. "Actually, I came with a job proposal," Paul continued. "We need someone to teach tutoring classes at the school. It would be part-time, 3 times a week. Would you be interested?" George's eyes lit up. Going back to school, even part-time, would be a dream. "But I can't walk anymore," he hesitated. "And does that matter?" Paul asked, genuinely confused. "You're one of the best teachers we've ever had. The kids who study here with Mrs. Margaret are doing very well in school." Margaret, who was listening to the conversation, felt her heart warm. She saw how moved George was by the proposal. "Accept it," she whispered to him. "You were born to teach." "But what about here at the flower shop?" he asked, worried. "You can still help me here on the other days," she replied, smiling. "We'll manage." George accepted the proposal that same day. For the first time in months, he felt his life was getting back on track. The news that George would be teaching again spread quickly through the town. Parents were excited, and many who had been his students years ago came to greet him and thank him for his teachings. "Professor George," exclaimed Annabeth, a former student who was now a nurse, "you taught me to like math. Without your classes, I never would have passed the college entrance exam." Moments like these reminded George why he had chosen to be a teacher. The impact an educator can have on people's lives goes far beyond grades or approvals. Meanwhile, Michael kept trying to find his father, but now for increasingly desperate reasons. Jennifer had developed complications in her pregnancy and needed complete rest. Medical expenses had gone up, and he had missed several job opportunities because of his tarnished reputation. "I need to talk to my father," he told Margaret one Friday afternoon, looking more humble than other times. "He doesn't want to talk to you," Margaret replied firmly. "Please, Mrs. Margaret, my wife is having problems with her pregnancy. I'm desperate. And when your father needed help, what did you do?" she retorted. Michael lowered his head. For the first time, he began to truly understand what he had done. "I know I was wrong," he admitted, "but I need to talk to him." "If you really want to talk to your father, you'll have to wait until he's ready," Margaret said. "And from what I see, he's not yet." In fact, George had seen Michael from the back window of the flower shop several times. Each time it happened, he felt a mix of pain and anger that he still couldn't fully process. "He keeps coming here," George commented to Margaret after Michael left. "Do you want to talk to him?" she asked carefully. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "It still hurts a lot. And I'm afraid he only wants something." Margaret understood perfectly. She herself had been abandoned by her family when she needed support the most, and she knew how hard it is to trust people who have let you down again. The following weeks brought significant changes for everyone involved. George started teaching at the school and quickly became beloved by the students again. His reputation as an exceptional teacher was quickly restored. "Teacher, you're much better than the previous teacher," commented Brittany, a 7th grade student. "You explain in a way we understand." "Thank you, Brittany," George replied, his heart warming. "But remember, what's important is that you learn. I'm just here to help." At the flower shop, business picked up even more. Parents came to buy flowers and took the chance to enroll their kids in the tutoring classes George gave there on other days of the week. "I've never had so much business," Margaret remarked, counting the money at the end of a particularly busy day. "You brought luck to this place." "It's not luck, Margaret," George answered. "It's honest work. People notice when you truly dedicate yourself. It was exactly that dedication that was missing in Michael's life. His financial situation was getting worse. Jennifer needed constant medical monitoring, and the basic health plan they had didn't cover all the necessary tests. To make matters worse, he was demoted at work after a conflict with a client. "Michael, your behavior is affecting the company," the supervisor explained. "We're transferring you to a position with less responsibility." The demotion came with a significant pay cut. That night, Michael sat at the kitchen table and tried to do the math. He couldn't balance the budget no matter what. "How are we going to pay for everything?" Jennifer asked, seeing the desperation on her husband's face. "I don't know," he admitted for the first time. "Maybe I have to look for another job." "Michael, you know what the solution is," she said gently. "Go talk to your father." "He doesn't want to talk to me." "Because you never truly apologized," Jennifer retorted. "You only want to talk to him now because you found out about the money." The observation hit Michael like a well-aimed arrow. That was exactly what was happening, and he knew it. That same night, he made a decision. He would go to the flower shop the next day and wouldn't leave without talking to his father, but this time, he would try to do things differently. On Saturday morning, Michael arrived at the flower shop early. Margaret was watering the plants when she saw him approaching. "Your father isn't here," she said before he could even ask. "Mrs. Margaret, please, I need to talk to him." "He's at school, teaching a tutoring class," she replied, noticing something different in Michael's tone. "But I don't know if he'll want to see you." Michael was surprised. He didn't know his father had gone back to teaching. "He's teaching at school?" "Yes, 3 times a week. And here at the flower shop on the other days," Margaret explained, watching his reaction. "Your father has found a new purpose in life." Michael felt a pang of something he couldn't immediately identify. Later, he realized it was envy. Envy of seeing that his father was doing well, was being useful, was rebuilding his life without him. "Can I go to the school?" he asked. "You can," Margaret answered. "But if you're going there just to ask for money, you'd better not show up." "It's not just about the money," Michael said, and for the first time he seemed to be sincere. Margaret watched him for a moment before responding. "All right, but if you hurt that man again, you'll have to deal with me." The threat was clear, and Michael realized Margaret had become a fierce protector of his father. At the school, George was finishing a tutoring class when he saw a familiar shadow at the classroom door. His heart raced when he recognized Michael standing there, hesitant. "Teacher, is class over already?" asked Jessica, a 5th grade student. "Yes, my dear," George replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "You can go. See you on Monday." The children ran out laughing, leaving father and son alone in the classroom. The silence stretched for long minutes. Michael didn't know how to begin, and George didn't know if he wanted to listen. "Dad," Michael finally broke the silence. "What do you want, Michael?" George asked coldly. "I want to talk." "Talk about what?" "About how I'm a useless burden." The bitterness in the old man's voice was palpable. Michael felt the words like slaps to the face. Hearing his father repeat exactly what he had said on that terrible day made him realize how cruel he had been. "Dad, I was upset that day." Upset?" George interrupted. "Upset is forgetting to buy milk at the store. What you did was throw me out of my own home." "I know, Dad, I know I was wrong." "You know?" George asked, his voice rising a tone. "Then why did you only show up now? Why didn't you come looking for me on the first day?" Michael couldn't answer. The truth was that he had only gone to look for his father after discovering the money, and they both knew it. "It's because of the bank letter, isn't it?" George asked, confirming his suspicions when he saw the expression on his son's face. "Not just because of that." "Lies!" George slammed his hand on the wheelchair's desk. "You only came here because you found out I have money saved." "Dad, Jennifer is having problems with her pregnancy. I lost the promotion at work." "And what does that have to do with me?" George asked cruelly. "I'm a useless burden, remember? What do you need a useless person for?" Michael felt his eyes fill with tears. He was seeing his father for the first time in weeks, and all he could do was argue. "Dad, please, I know I have no right, but I need your help." Now you need me, George replied. When I needed you, you put me out on the street. I was desperate with the bills, with Jennifer's pregnancy. And you think I don't know what despair is? George asked, his voice trembling with emotion. You think I don't know what it's like to be in a wheelchair, depending on others, feeling useless? Michael finally began to understand the extent of the suffering he had caused his father. Dad, I'm sorry. Sorry? George repeated. You kicked me out of the house, called me a burden, humiliated me in front of my daughter-in-law, and now you want me to accept an apology? What can I do for you to forgive me? George looked at his son for a long moment before answering. Nothing, Michael. There's nothing you can do. Some wounds are too deep. Dad, please. Go away, Michael, George said, turning the wheelchair to no longer look at his son. I have a new life now. I have people who value me, who respect me. I don't need you anymore. The words hit Michael like stab wounds. That was exactly how he had made his father feel that terrible day. Dad, I know you have every right to be angry. Angry? George laughed bitterly. Son, I'm past anger. Now it's indifference. Michael left the school with a shattered heart. For the first time he truly understood what he had done. Not only had he kicked his father out of the house, but he had destroyed the relationship between them. When he got home, Jennifer was in bed, pale and visibly tired. Did you manage to talk to your dad? She asked hopefully. I did, Michael replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. But it wasn't what I expected. He didn't want to forgive you. Jennifer, I destroyed everything, Michael said, his voice choked. He's right to be angry. I only looked for him now because I found out about the money. Jennifer held her husband's hand. Michael, we all make mistakes. The important thing is to acknowledge them and try to fix them. But what if it's too late? What if he never forgives me? Then you'll have to learn to live with the consequences, she said sadly. But you can't give up. He's your father, and this baby, she touched her belly, will be his grandchild. The mention of the baby made Michael feel even worse. His child would grow up without knowing his grandfather because of his mistakes. At the flower shop, George arrived visibly shaken after the encounter with Michael. Margaret immediately noticed something had happened. Did he come to the school? She asked. He did, George replied, positioning his wheelchair near the counter. And it was exactly as I imagined. Did he ask for money? Not directly, but it was obvious that's what he wanted. George sighed. Said that Jennifer is having problems with the pregnancy, that she lost the promotion. Margaret shook her head in disapproval. And you? How did you feel seeing him? Confused, George admitted. On one hand, I felt like helping. After all, he's my son. On the other hand, I felt angry knowing he only showed up because he needs money. What did you tell him? That I don't need him in my life anymore, George answered. But the sadness in his voice showed that wasn't entirely true. Margaret knew George well enough to realize he was suffering with the situation as much as Michael. You know you can forgive him without giving him money, right? She said softly. I know. But I'm not ready to forgive yet, George confessed. It hurts too much, Margaret. It hurts to know that my own son only looks for me when he needs something. But what if he's truly sorry? Do you believe that? George asked, looking directly at her. Margaret hesitated before answering. I don't know. But I think you both deserve a chance to talk properly. The following days were difficult for the whole family. Jennifer had to be hospitalized again because of pregnancy complications. Michael missed more days of work and was called in for a final conversation with his supervisor. Michael, we understand your family situation, but we can no longer tolerate the absences, the boss explained. Unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go. The news of the unemployment hit Michael like a bolt of lightning. Now, on top of all the other problems, he no longer had a steady income. How are we going to survive? Jennifer asked when he told her about the dismissal. I don't know, he admitted, feeling completely lost. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He stayed on the small porch of the house, looking at the stars and thinking about how his life had gotten so complicated in such a short time. For the first time, he began to wonder if all the problems weren't the result of his own actions. The loss of the promotion, the social isolation, the unemployment, the marital issues, everything had started after he kicked his father out of the house. "Are people punishing me for what I did?" he asked himself. In truth, it wasn't exactly a punishment. It was the natural result of his choices. In a small town, actions like that had inevitable social consequences. Meanwhile, George was building something meaningful at the flower shop and the school. The educational project had grown so much that he decided to make it official by creating a small teaching cooperative. "Margaret, what if we created something bigger?" he proposed one Thursday afternoon. "A community educational space." "What do you mean?" "We could expand the space back here, create more classrooms, hire other retired teachers," George explained, excited. "Many children need tutoring and many retired teachers want to stay useful." The idea excited Margaret. "Do you think it would work?" "I'm sure," George replied, "and I can invest my savings in the project." It was the first time he mentioned using his saved money for something constructive. Margaret realized that George had found a greater purpose in life. "Let's talk to the school principal," she suggested. "Maybe he can guide us on how to make this official." Principal Paul was enthusiastic about the proposal when they presented it. "Professor George, this is an excellent idea," he exclaimed. "The town really needs a tutoring center, and you're the perfect person to lead it." "It would be a non-profit project," George explained. "The goal is to help the children, not make money." "Even better," Paul replied. "I can help with the paperwork, and I know other retired teachers who would love to participate." The project quickly took shape. Within 2 weeks, George already had 5 retired teachers interested in participating and 25 families wanting to enroll their children. The news of the educational project spread through the town and reached Michael's ears through a neighbor. "Your father is starting a tutoring school at Mrs. Margaret's flower shop," commented Mr. Anthony, who lived next door. "They say he's going to invest his savings in the project." Michael felt a mix of surprise and frustration. His father was willing to spend the money on strangers, but didn't want to help his own family. "A school?" he asked, pretending not to care much. "Yes. My granddaughter is already going there. She says your father teaches very well." That night, Michael couldn't get the information out of his head. Jennifer noticed he was restless. "What's wrong?" she asked. "My father is starting a school with the money he saved," Michael told her. "The money he could have used to help us." Jennifer looked at him with a tired expression. "Michael, don't you think he has the right to do what he wants with his own money?" "He does, but—" "But what?" she interrupted. "You kicked him out of the house, and now you're angry because he rebuilt his life." "Jennifer, we need that money." "Do we?" she asked, getting up from the bed with difficulty. "Or do you want to? What's the difference?" "The difference, Michael, is that you're thinking about the money as if it were an inheritance," Jennifer explained. "But your father hasn't passed away. He's alive and has every right to spend his savings however he wants." Michael didn't know how to respond. Deep down, he knew Jennifer was right, but the frustration was stronger than reason. The following month, something unexpected happened. A journalist from the regional newspaper found out about George's educational project and decided to write a story about it. "Professor George, tell us about this educational project," the journalist requested during the interview. "It's simple," George explained, smiling. "I believe every child deserves a second chance to learn. Often they just need a different explanation from someone who has patience." The story was published under the headline, "Retired Teacher Creates Free Educational Center After Being Abandoned by Family." The article told the whole story, from being kicked out of the house to creating the project. When Michael read the article, he felt exposed and humiliated. The whole town, and now the whole region, knew what he had done to his father. "Why did he have to give an interview?" Michael complained to Jennifer. "Now everyone will know about our lives." "Michael, his life is no longer ours," Jennifer responded with a calmness that surprised even herself. "You yourself said he was no longer part of the family. But this makes me look bad." "You made yourself look bad when you kicked your father out of the house," she countered. The journalist only told the truth. The article had an unexpected effect. Several people in the region began offering donations for the educational project. A local business owner offered to renovate the space for free. A school supply store donated notebooks and pencils for the children. "I can't believe so much generosity," Margaret commented, counting the donations that arrived daily. "That's what happens when people see honest work being done," George responded, moved by the community's response. The project was becoming bigger than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, Michael's situation continued to deteriorate. Without a job and with a wife needing constant medical care, he had to sell some furniture from the house to pay the bills. "Maybe it would be better for me to go live with my mother until the baby is born," Jennifer suggested one particularly difficult afternoon. "No," Michael protested. "We'll manage somehow." "How, Michael? How will we manage?" and she asked, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have a job, I can't work, the bills are overdue. I'll figure something out." "What way?" Jennifer asked, losing patience. "The only way would be for you to swallow your pride and properly apologize to your father." "I already tried. He doesn't want to talk to me." "You tried?" Jennifer asked, incredulous. "Michael, you went there once, argued with him and left. That's not trying." "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to humble yourself," she shouted, surprising both with her own intensity. "I want you to go there, kneel if you have to, and beg forgiveness for what you did." "Jennifer." "No, Michael. I'm tired of watching you try to justify the unjustifiable. You abandoned your father when he needed you most, and now you want him to help you without even properly acknowledging the mistake you made." Jennifer was right, and Michael knew it, but pride still weighed heavier than reason. A few days later, however, something happened that completely changed his perspective. Jennifer fainted at home and had to be rushed to the hospital. The doctors said she would need to remain hospitalized until the end of the pregnancy. "Her condition is delicate," the doctor explained to Michael. "We'll have to monitor her constantly, and she will need a lot of emotional support." "How long will she stay here?" Michael asked, worried. "At least 2 months until the baby is born. 2 months of hospitalization." Michael did the math in his head and realized he couldn't afford it. That night, sitting by Jennifer's bedside in the hospital, Michael finally understood he had hit rock bottom. He no longer had a job, no more money. His wife was hospitalized, and he was completely alone. "Jennifer, I don't know what to do anymore," he confessed, holding her hand. "I know what you need to do," she said softly. "And you know it too. I don't know if he will take me in." "Michael, listen," Jennifer said, squeezing his hand. "It's not about money anymore. It's about you having a family. Our son will be born in 2 months. Do you want him to grow up without knowing his grandfather?" The question hit Michael hard. He thought of his own childhood, the special moments he had with his father, the lessons he learned, the love he received. Would he be able to deprive his own son of that because of pride? "Go talk to your father," Jennifer pleaded, "but go with an open heart, without thinking about money. Go as a son who wants his father back." That same night, Michael made a decision. He would seek out his father again, but this time it would be different. The next morning, Michael went straight to the flower shop. It was Saturday, and he knew his father would be there, giving tutoring lessons to the children. When he arrived, he saw through the window a scene he would never forget. George was in the middle of a circle of children, explaining math with patience and care. The little ones laughed and asked questions, completely at ease with the teacher. "Now, do you understand how division works?" George asked. "I got it, Grandpa George," replied a girl about 8 years old. Grandpa George. The word struck Michael like a revelation. Those children saw his father as the grandfather they didn't have, and he as the father he had never truly been. Michael waited for the children to leave before entering the flower shop. Margaret was arranging some flowers when she saw him. "Is he here?" Michael asked humbly. "He's in the back," she replied, watching him closely. "But this time, if you're just here to ask for money—" "I won't ask for money," Michael interrupted. "I swear on my son's life that I won't ask for money." Margaret noticed something different in his tone. There was a sincerity that hadn't been there the other times. "All right," she said, "but if you hurt him again—" "I won't hurt him," Michael promised. George was putting away the teaching materials when he saw Michael standing at the back door of the flower shop. His first impulse was to send his son away, but something in his eyes made him hesitate. "What do you want this time?" George asked, but without the hostility of previous times. "I want to ask for forgiveness," Michael said simply. "You've tried that before?" "No, Dad. Before I wanted something. This time I just want your forgiveness." George observed his son carefully. Michael seemed different, more humble, more broken, more sincere. "Dad, I know I have no right to be here," Michael continued, his voice choked. "I know I was the worst son in the world. I know I hurt you in a way that may never heal." George didn't respond, but he didn't send him away either. "But I need you to know that I regret every day what I did," Michael said, tears beginning to fall. "I regret kicking you out, calling you useless, not valuing everything you did for me." "Why now, Michael?" George asked softly. "Why only now are you telling me this?" "Because I saw you with those children," Michael confessed. "I saw how they love you, how they respect you, how important you are to them. And I realized I threw away what they value so much." "And the money?" George asked, testing his son's sincerity. "I don't want your money, Dad," Michael said, looking directly into his father's eyes. "I want my father back. I want my son to know his grandfather. I want to learn to be a better man." It was the first time in months that George had seen real sincerity in his son's eyes. "Michael, you hurt me deeply," George said slowly. "More than you can imagine." "I know, Dad. And I know you might never be able to fully forgive me. It's hard to forgive when someone only shows up because they need something," George explained. "But I don't need anything this time," Michael insisted. "I'm here because I realized I lost what was most important." George remained silent for several minutes, processing his son's words. He had suffered greatly from the rejection, but he had never stopped loving Michael. "Sit down," George finally said, pointing to a nearby chair. Michael sat, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "Tell me how Jennifer is," George requested. "She's hospitalized," Michael confessed, "with pregnancy complications. She'll stay in the hospital until the baby is born. And you, how's work going?" "I'm not working," Michael admitted, ashamed. "I got fired because of my absences." George shook his head, worried despite everything. "And the bills?" "They're overdue," Michael confessed. "But I'm not here because of that, Dad. I'm here because I want my family back." "Your family? You, Dad, you are my family. And I want you to be my child's family too." George felt his heart soften. Despite all the hurt, this was his son, and soon he would be a grandfather. "Michael, what you did to me was very serious," he said. "It's not something you forget overnight." "I know, Dad. I don't expect you to forgive me now. I just hope you'll give me a chance to prove I've changed." "How have you changed?" George asked. "I learned that family is the most important thing in the world," Michael replied. "I learned that money can be earned, but a father you only have one. I learned that nothing justifies abandoning those you love." The words touched George deeply. He saw sincerity in his son's eyes that he hadn't seen in years. "And if I forgive you, how can I be sure you won't push me away again at the first difficulty?" George asked. "Because now I know what it's like to be alone," Michael answered. "Michael, I know what it's like to have no family to rely on, and I never want to feel that way again in my life." George remained thoughtful for several minutes. Margaret appeared at the back door with a cup of coffee. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, offering the coffee to George. "I just wanted to make sure everything's okay." "It is, Margaret," George replied. "Thank you." She withdrew, but was pleased to see father and son finally talking without arguing. "Dad, I know I don't deserve it, but would you give me another chance?" Michael asked. "What kind of chance?" "A chance to be your son again. A chance to take care of you. A chance to do things right this time." George looked at his son for a long moment. He saw the broken man he had become, but also the boy he had raised with so much love. "Michael, I never stopped loving you," he confessed. "Even when I was angriest, I kept loving you." "I love you too, Dad," Michael said, tears now flowing freely. "I love you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." "Come here," George said, opening his arms. Michael knelt beside the wheelchair and hugged his father for the first time in months. Both cried, releasing months of pain, hurt, and longing. "Forgive me, Dad," Michael whispered. "I forgive you, my son," George replied, tightening the embrace. "I forgive you." It was the beginning of a reconciliation that would be long and difficult, but one both were determined to build. In the days that followed, Michael began visiting the flower shop daily, not to work or ask for favors, but simply to spend time with his father and rebuild their relationship. "How is the school project going?" Michael asked one afternoon, genuinely interested. "Very well," George replied, happy to see his son's interest. "We already have 40 children enrolled and 7 retired teachers collaborating." "Are you fulfilled?" "I am," George admitted. "I feel useful again." Michael listened attentively to his father's stories about the educational project. He saw how he spoke passionately about teaching, about making a difference in children's lives. "Dad, can I help with anything?" he offered. "You?" George asked, surprised. "I know I don't understand education like you do, but I can help with other things, cleaning, organizing, whatever you need." George was touched by the offer. "You don't have to, Michael. You must be worried about finding another job." "I will look for a job, yes, but in the meantime, I'd like to help you." From that day on, Michael began helping with the educational project. He cleaned the classrooms, organized the materials, helped receive the children. It was volunteer work, unpaid, but he did it with pleasure because he was close to his father. Margaret observed everything cautiously at first, but gradually she realized that Michael had really changed. "He seems different," she commented to George. "He is different," George agreed. "I think going through hardships made him mature." "Do you trust him again?" "Not completely yet," George confessed, "but I'm trying." 2 weeks after the reconciliation, Michael received an unexpected job offer. The principal of the municipal school, who had observed his volunteer work in the educational project, called him to talk. "Michael, we need someone to work in the school office," Paul offered. "The salary isn't much, but it's an honest job." "Principal, I accept," Michael replied immediately. "Thank you for the opportunity." "The one you have to thank is your father," Paul said. "He was the one who told me about your dedication to the educational project." Michael was moved to learn that his father had interceded for him. "Dad, Principal Paul told me that you were the one who spoke to him about my work," Michael thanked that afternoon. "I only spoke the truth," George replied. "That you are dedicating yourself and trying to do the right things. Thank you for trusting me." "Son, everyone deserves a second chance," George said. "You are proving that you deserve yours." Michael's life began to stabilize again. With the new job, he managed to settle the overdue bills and get financially organized. Jennifer followed her husband's entire transformation from the hospital. He visited her every day and told her about the reconciliation with his father, about the work in the educational project, about the new job. "I'm proud of you," she said during a visit. "You've become the man I always knew you could be." "Jennifer, I want you to get to know my father better when you leave the hospital," Michael said. "I want our son to grow up near his grandfather." "I want that too," she replied, smiling. "I've always wanted a close family." The relationship between them was also strengthening with the changes Michael was making. 1 month after the reconciliation, George made an unexpected proposal to his son. "Michael, I have something to tell you," he said one afternoon at the flower shop. "Speak, Dad." "I want you to come back home." Michael looked at his father in surprise. "Come back home?" "The house you live in was mine, right?" George said. "I built it. I paid for it. But now it's yours too, and I would like to move back there, if you'll have me." "Of course I'll have you, Dad," Michael exclaimed. "The house was always yours." "No, Michael," George corrected. "The house is ours, yours, mine, and Jennifer's. When our grandson is born, I want to be there to help take care of him." "Dad, are you sure?" Michael asked, still not believing it. "After everything I did." "Michael, family is family," George said. "And we've learned that problems are solved together, not apart." Michael hugged his father, emotional. He finally felt his family was being rebuilt. "But I will continue with the educational project," George made clear. "It's important to me." "Of course, Dad, and I will keep helping too." George's return home was an emotional celebration. Michael had cleaned and tidied everything, preparing a special room on the ground floor so his father wouldn't have trouble with the stairs. "It's so good to be home," George said, looking around nostalgically. "It's so good to have you home," Michael replied. Margaret was there to help with the move and was happy to see the family reunited again. "Mr. George, will you keep helping me at the flower shop?" she asked. "Of course, Margaret," he answered. "You saved me when I needed it most. I'll never forget that." "We saved each other," she corrected, smiling. In the following weeks, the family's routine settled harmoniously. George divided his time between the flower shop, the school, and the house. Michael worked at the school office in the morning and helped with the educational project in the afternoon. Jennifer left the hospital 2 weeks before the baby was born and was delighted with the changes she found at home. "Michael, you really have changed," she said, watching how he tenderly cared for his father. "I learned from my mistakes," he replied, "and I learned that family is the most important thing in the world." George watched their interaction and felt his heart warm seeing that his son had become a better man. The birth of Gabriel Wilson, a name chosen in honor of George's late father, was a deeply emotional moment for the whole family. "Dad, would you like to hold your grandson?" Michael offered, extending the baby to George. "May I?" the grandfather asked, his eyes shining with emotion. "Of course you may," Jennifer said, smiling. "He is your grandson." When George held Gabriel for the first time, all the past hurt seemed to completely disappear. There was a new life, a new chance to be a family, a new opportunity for love. "Welcome to the family, my little grandson," George whispered to the baby. "Grandpa is going to teach you a lot of math." Everyone laughed, and Michael felt he had finally found the happiness he had lost with his wrong choices. The following months brought a family harmony that hadn't existed in a long time. George was a devoted grandfather, always willing to help with Gabriel. Michael proved to be a loving father and a remorseful son who cherished every moment with his dad. The educational project continued to grow and became a benchmark in the region. George was invited to give talks in other cities about inclusive education and valuing the elderly. "I never thought I'd reach 73 and still have so much to give," he commented to Margaret during one of these talks. "You always had a lot to give," she replied. "You just needed the right people to recognize it." Michael attended one of these talks and felt immense pride in the father he had almost lost because of his own blindness. 2 years after Gabriel's birth, the family was completely restored. Michael had been promoted at the school and was respected in the community again. Jennifer was pregnant with their second child. George was a beloved figure in town, respected both for the educational project and for how he overcame adversity. During one of Gabriel's birthday parties, surrounded by family and friends, George made a special toast. "I want to thank everyone here today," he said, raising his glass. "Especially Margaret, who took me in when I had nowhere to go, and to my son Michael, who had the courage to acknowledge his mistakes and fight to win back our family." "Dad, I'm the one who should be thanking you," Michael said, emotional, "for teaching me that forgiveness is possible and that family is rebuilt with love and dedication." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe George made the right decision by forgiving Michael? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.